Welcome back to Uncanny X-Minutes, where we bring you the comics behind the movies. I'm producer James.
And I'm Saja.
And this week we're talking about X2 X-Men United, minutes 60 through 70.
Yes. In this 10 minutes, we've got the police confronting the X-teens at Bobby's house, Iceman. Professor X gets caught up in Jason Stryker's mind palace, whatever you'd like to call it. Storm flexes her weather powers for once in the series, and a falling blackbird is caught by the benevolent Magneto.
And you will welcome him for it.
Yes, you should. You're welcome.
You're welcome. I love it. I love that they're falling, and he's just like, I got you. Don't worry about it.
What are you going to do if he wasn't there?
Crash?
Yeah, basically.
Just straight crash. I think Nightcrawler would have been fine.
Yeah.
He'd been like, what? No, I'll take one. I got one.
Yeah.
Let's go. Anyway.
It's one of my favorite lines, actually, in the new animated series where Magneto turns to Gambit and says, if this crashes, you're the only person that would have an issue with gravity. And that's very funny.
I mean, I guess, yeah, that's true. There is a lot of X-Men who can handle falling from a plane, no problem. Gambit is not one of them. Actually, Jean's fine. Storm's fine. Yeah. Nightcrawler's fine. Yeah, they would have just gotten out.
Yeah.
But they would have to eject.
Yeah, probably.
There's your problem.
But still, I feel like they would have been. I mean, they can open a side of metal plane.
Sure.
Please, they're the X-Men.
Sure.
Anyway.
This 10 minutes has one delightful scene that I always remember fondly, which is the police showing up at Bobby's house because Bobby's brother is a jerk.
A huge jerk.
That's why we never wrote him into the comics, because he's a big jerk.
Yep.
He calls the cops on his own brother.
Yeah. And not just like the regular cops. That they're like might kill him.
Well, they're Boston police.
Yeah, but like they're going to turn them over. They're not just going to jail. Like they're going to they're gonna
underground mutant organization problems.
Terrorist problems.
Yes. But in this sequence, we get to actually see Pyro sort of let loose for a minute. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like it. I kind of dig it.
Yeah. So, okay. Pyro is interesting because he is an X-Men in the movies.
Yeah.
Pyro is not an X-Men in most of the comics.
No, he is a capital B, capital G, bad guy.
Yes, he is primarily associated with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. You should know who they are because we did a whole episode about it before we talked about Toad. He runs with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and in multiple different incarnations, including one of the ones run by Mystique as well.
Right. Well, so that's how he gets introduced, is in the iconic 2-issue run, Days of Future Past.
Yes.
He is part of Mystique's Brotherhood in that run, and that's how we get introduced to him.
Yeah. He's primarily a bad guy, and even when he's working for quote unquote the good guys. So he's usually running with Mystique, who's usually a bad guy. And even when he's working for the American government,
as Freedom Force.
As Freedom Force, yes, under Mystique's flag. It's literally the
Still
Brotherhood.
the Brotherhood. It's a relabeling. We didn't like the word evil, so we're going to go with Freedom Force.
Yes. That being said, there have been occasional bouts of, I don't know, like friendliness, as the Brotherhood sometimes does, and Mystique sometimes does with the X-Men.
Well, they're all on the same side sometimes.
Generally, right? They're mutants. I mean, that's kind of the whole point why Magneto founded the Brotherhood. It's about like future for mutants, right? So, for example, when all of the X-Men are going to die, this is like really early. This is like when X-Men start operating out of Australia.
Ah, okay.
But right before that, they like quote unquote die.
Sure.
Destiny actually foresees the death of the X-Men. And so rather than talking to them as a reasonable person, her and Mystique obviously come up with a plot with Pyro to...
You know what, though? In all honesty, if you're a precog, you probably see it's not going to go well if you just talk to him.
That's a good point.
You have to manipulate everyone.
That being said, let's remind ourselves that this is Mystique and Destiny, and that their default state is to manipulate rather than talk things through.
I mean, if you see the manipulation is going to work, that's the more fun one.
I suppose. Well, it didn't work, so surprise.
Shoot.
So
there was a chance it wasn't going to work. I'm just saying.
So their plan was to capture the X-Men as Freedom Force and kind of keep them imprisoned, thereby dodging their destiny of death.
There you go.
It doesn't work. And then what the outcome is, because Ileana finds out after her brother dies that the Freedom Force like was somehow involved in their capture and stuff, she gets revenge on them. It's not, see, this is what I mean. Dusty clearly didn't see that through. I do not want an angry Ileana Rasputin magic showing up on my doorstep. I would avoid that if at all possible.
Agreed.
So yeah. So occasionally some good guy behavior.
Yeah.
But ultimately Pyro is primarily a bad guy.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting that he's on the good guys here, though, well, for the moment.
Yeah. Because, of course, the other thing we always got to hit in Hoxpox, he is part of the Marauders, which is Kitty's crew of running around the world rescuing mutants who can't get through the gates.
Like their countries won't
won't let them is usually what it is. There's these gates that lead to Krakoa that only mutants can go through. So if a country doesn't want their mutants going, like basically leaving the country, they'll put armies outside these gates.
Actually, Russia does this to their one in particular. I remember that.
Pyro is like, yeah, of course I'll go in and mess up some armies so we can rescue people. That sounds like fun.
Yes.
It is chaos. Like he is chaotic good in this scenario.
In that run.
In this run. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
generally probably more chaotic neutral.
He literally tattoos like the Marauders logo onto his face.
That's true. He does have a skull inked on half his face now.
Well, it goes away when he died.
Right. But he had it for a while.
But he had it for a while.
It was very cool. I honestly
great.
think he should have kept it personally.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking off mic about how over time characters can be kind of fun, and this is one of those situations where somebody found a good way to make Pyro very interesting and intriguing and on my radar, essentially.
Yeah. It is like, Pyro does have all of the elements of somebody who could be your berserker on a good guy team, right?
Yeah.
He's like not exactly like the Hulk, but like in terms of like moral direction, kind of, right? Like where
just point him at the problem.
Yes, where it's like you need to blow things up, just put Pyro on a direct collision course to the problem and he will solve it with fire, right?
Yeah.
I'm surprised it took this long, really, to put him on a good guy team. But generally, his personality doesn't really lend to that. And as we were reading, we were trying to pull some stuff for Pyro, trying to be like, what's really in the meat of his character? And I'm going to be honest, couldn't find a ton.
No. Even doing the preliminary work was like, no, he's just on, he's either on this brotherhood or he's on the Freedom Force. He's on a different brotherhood. Like he's on groups of bad guys. That's it. Even last week's episode doing the Iceman solo series from 2017, he just shows up for like the beginning of an issue and he's not even the focus. It's about young and old Bobby hanging out and he's sitting there going, no, we must push ourselves from the oppressors. And they're like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like they're not even talking to him. He's just spouting nonsense and they're just freezing him.
That's just kind of the general respect that you give to Pyro in the comic books. Like, he's almost a Toad level character in that way.
Except for he's more powerful.
He's definitely more powerful and he's gotten a little bit more away from the jester role. But
I will say the one thing I found interesting that I had flipped in my head is I didn't realize that he didn't create fire when the movie came out.
Oh,
so like when he was like, oh, I can't create it, I only can manipulate it. I was like, oh, I thought it was the other way around.
No, Master of the Eternal Flame.
Yeah, but it's almost like the movie Firebenders from Avatar The Last Airbender, where they couldn't create fire, they only could manipulate it.
Yeah.
Did you know there's another Pyro?
Yes, I did know there's another
So
Pyro.
There's another one who is more like an animated firebender.
Yes.
Simon Lasker is another Pyro who can create fire.
What team? Has he been on any teams
so
or anything?
He was on another Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Oh, okay.
But this one was created by basically a Fox News talk show host. It was like Truth Network or something like that. Her name was Lydia Nance.
Okay.
And she was very anti-mutant on the news. She got Mesmero to manipulate a bunch of bad mutants into a team to attack like the UN.
As kind of like a what do they call it? A
false flag operation.
Operation.
It was partly that, partly to get Kitty Pryde's X-Men and X-Men Gold in trouble as well.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
So yeah.
Yeah,
but he just shows up, and he's also just like a fire. Like, we don't really get to talk to him.
Oh, and so that's Rachel Summers also with
yes.
Mesmer. I know exactly what you're talking about. Now I understand. Yes. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. It's weird.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't get that far, but apparently he ends up with Iceman for like at the end of an issue.
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Interesting. There's also like a little like thing with Dawkins too at some point with Iceman, but
yeah, that's in the solo series.
Yeah. Anyway, back to. But I honestly, I think that's all I've got for Pyro. Can we talk about a character that I really want to talk about?
Who do you really want to talk about?
I want to talk about Storm.
Yeah, you do, because we finally see her. When we were watching the movie together, I was surprised. I didn't remember how many tornadoes this woman throws at everyone.
It's a lot of tornadoes.
They're like, hey, could you maybe help us? And she's like, no problem. Tornado, 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 tornado. And I was like, why does this doesn't stick with me? I think it's the CGI-ness of it all. Mm-hmm. When you throw so much CGI at me, it doesn't land as hard.
Eyes glaze over.
A little bit.
It's a Transformers problem.
Right?
If everything is moving, nothing is moving.
Exactly. I don't know what it is. I've seen this movie a bunch of times, but that sequence, nothing. Because it's only a couple minutes, too. It's not even that long.
No.
And it doesn't account to much. It just gets a few of the jets away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't it does work, but then they crash anyway.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sure, I can't remember exactly. I think she might be a little more overpowered in like Apocalypse. Mm-hmm. But like might be her most powerful move. Mm-hmm. In the movie series? That's a shame.
We'll keep getting through it, but I think that is correct.
We're going to keep an eye on for that.
Yeah. But what we are going to talk about is, so if her character is leveling up, shall we say, powering up in these movies, because we went from like a little breeze earlier, a little bit of slush.
A lightning bolt here and there.
Yeah. To now 12 tornadoes, which is a huge power jump.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We went into the comics and we started digging around for some examples, not all of them, but some of them, of Storm kind of having her powers shift and get stronger or change. Personally, I think like there are two instances that I feel like are kind of key for me when I think about Storm's power like really changing. We talked a lot about Bobby last week, and there's two for me. The first is during the storyline that we've talked about. Do you remember the 12?
Yeah.
Okay. In that...
This was like early 2000s.
Yes.
Yeah.
In that run with Apocalypse trying to gather everybody, and Storm is one of the mutants that he's gathering, Storm sees a vision of herself in an alternate future. Mm-hmm. And that she sees that if she really wanted to, she could evolve secondary mutation, however you want to phrase it, into like being purely like like an elemental being.
Okay.
And have like these crazy elemental powers where she is like, she has overcome the need for physical form, which is very cool.
Yeah.
She doesn't do that, but there is an alternate universe that
where that
glimpse
could happen.
Where that happened.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I do like in the Krakoan era that she helps get a climate for Mars.
She does.
And can control that too.
Yes. It's not just Earth.
The fact that she can adjust her powers, because think about it, like she's basically Earth-based weather patterns. The fact she can go to another planet and be like, give me a minute to readjust. Mm-hmm. I got this.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It
planet-wide power.
It tracks.
Yeah.
It tracks,
It
actually.
does, yeah.
So we've talked about Storm being a goddess before. She was a goddess to her tribe in Kenya. They've talked about it. There's like a lot of like little stories here and there about it. But there was one in particular that I thought was really interesting. So there's a story where Aurora goes back to her tribe because she hears that her adoptive mother had passed away.
Okay.
So she goes back to the tribe. And also she gets the information that there's been a gap in the power vacuum there. This is X-Men Gold, by the way.
Okay.
Because she left, the people who were worshiping her have, like, some of them have faded away, and they're now worshiping this new thing, which they call a death cult in the U.S. She gets there. The townspeople say, no. The new god is, I apologize, it's Swahili, and I don't know how to pronounce it. I've just read it. So it's a U-O-V-O. So Uovo, maybe.
Best guess I got.
Best guess. And she goes and she gets there and is dealing with, like, her place being taken by another god who, long story short, he brings her parents back to life to try to convince her to be one of his followers. He's effectively like a zombie god, but he's a necromancer. Like, yes, he's a necromancer, exactly. But he does, like, take power from worship, and it is implied in that series that Aurora does too.
Yeah.
And she finds out that this guy killed her adopted mother. She didn't just pass away. It was like this whole thing. She has to save the town. She does, etc., etc. But how she does do it is by calling her. Did you know that Aurora has a hammer from Asgard?
I slightly remember that, yes.
Yeah. So
she calls that hammer?
She does. The hammer's called Stormcaster. In some alternate universes, it's called Stormbringer. It comes to her. She's actually had it before. This is not the first time that this Loki gives it to her. There's like a whole, when the New Mutants are on Asgard, there's this whole thing with Storm there, and she gets the, etc., the power of the goddess of thunder, quote unquote.
It's a shame we can't go into some of the nonsense the New Mutants are going to be getting into, because we only have one movie to talk to them about.
I know.
You're going to have to cram as much as you can in
that movie. I'm going to try so hard, because there's going to be so many things I want to talk about that are not nothing touched to say. On.
You're just going to be like, let's go.
I'm going to recite to you the entire New Mutants run.
And like 13 episodes. Actually, I think it's a shorter movie too, so it only might be 9 or 10 episodes.
That'll be like the one where I use the credits to really just keep talking. I'm not going to stop. Anyway, it's implied in the story that when her mom is being asked under pain of death by this god, which, by the way, the name is Swahili for evil. So like a big, huge red flag from the beginning.
And I hate it when I'm worshiping a god and his name ends up being evil.
Yeah. She wishes that her goddess will become truly divine. It is, and then it has a shot of the hammer in Asgard. That's when it flies to Aurora. This is really interesting because this scene happens like in a later issue. I think it's 31 or 32, 33 of X-Men Gold. But the hammer returning to her happened in 25.
Wow.
So because that's when her adopted mother's death happens.
Okay.
And she doesn't know why the hammer comes to her, but then it's explained later in the run. It's very interesting. And then you get the whole conclusion. I think it's super cool. They fight, and as she's fighting and they're like knocking out all of his followers, he gets weaker, and so her strength rises, and it's really cool and also really sad though, because when she defeats him, all of the people that were raised from the dead, including Aurora's original parents, who she had talked to and was connecting with again, but they all get to say like, we're so proud of you. You didn't abandon the village. You gave yourself to the world. It's supposed to be like a comfort thing towards her and a forgiveness. It's a really interesting thing, but it implies that she is on the level of Asgardian gods.
Wow. Well, we knew she was Omega level.
Right. But she is a real divinity, and that is the implication. And to double down on it,
being called a goddess was not an oversight.
Right. On top of it, there is, I can't remember, there's another issue, but like there are other gods that people have compared, been like, they're afraid of Aurora because she is a god.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes we forget and sometimes we remember, and that kind of goes back and forth, right, with her. But I think like where we've landed now, even with like X-Men Red, which is in the Hoxpox era, it is leaning heavily, like she is got divine power, however you want to interpret that in the Marvel universe, so whatever includes Loki and Thor, whatever. when she gets the hammer from Loki in the very early runs, like of whatever the X-Men issues those are, she defeats Hela straight up.
Whoa.
With the hammer. Yeah.
Not an easy feat.
No.
Not comic book Hela.
Yeah. So it is really interesting. I think those two, like the elemental version of herself, which reminds me a lot of the Bobby Drake, like wizened, like
the ice wizard.
The ice wizard kind of thing.
From the future that he could become.
Yes. And then the effectively like being rechristened as a god again are the two things that I feel like those are like the big Storm power-ups for me. Like, and they're very cool.
Now, this is one I didn't go back and read, but it's one of those that I had heard of and read a little bit. Wasn't there a time where Doctor Doom had Storm basically encased in a cocoon, essentially, and because she's claustrophobic, caused massive weather events to occur, leading her to do like a massive like freak out?
Yes. That happens in the X-Men Gold too.
Yeah.
Because the reason
hammer... similar...
Very similar.
It's not a one-time off.
No. It's really similar. She's held in a jail cell, and that's when the hammer calls to her.
Yeah.
Her mother passes away. The hammer comes to her because she can be, I think the line is, I can be afraid or angry or raged, and I choose rage. And so then it's like this huge explosion. She blows up this facility. Very similar to Dr. Doom holding her in the cocoon. And then, she breaks out, and then he invites her to dinner and tries to get her to date him, and she turns him down. She had the dinner, though. She heard him out. And she's just like,
I was watching this TikTok the other day where someone was like, who's the best chef in comic books? Mm-hmm. And the person's response was, well, it's not so much a chef as it is Dr. Doom's chefs.
Culinary staff.
Whoever he gets is the best in the world at the time.
That's true.
And then proceeded to show multiple occasions of heroes, villains, and everything else sitting down with Dr. Doom, having a meal, and everyone loving it.
Yeah.
So of course Storm's going to sit down and eat a meal with Dr. Doom.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. The funny part about it is this, like, it's basically Dr. Doom trying to romance Storm. And the same thing happens with Loki when in that run where he gives her the thing and she turns him down to like be with the X-Men. He's like, oh man, giving up the throne. She's a woman that it would almost be worth giving up the throne for. He like really thinks about it. Like,
wow.
Like the pull that Storm has in the comic books is very funny and great. But like, and this is Loki. This is early Loki we're talking about too.
Trickster god Loki.
Yes. He doesn't really see her as a human, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
He sees her as a god.
As an equal.
Which is like, if you read early Thor, early Loki, like that's not usually what's happening with humans and stuff, even mutants. So
she is the next evolution though,
That's the thing. Homo superior, I suppose.
I think we have talked about Omega level mutants before. I think we have classified them as just being almost limitless power.
Omega level, I think technically now there is no limit to like your power type.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like that's how they've redefined it.
Yeah.
I don't particularly love it. This has actually been really interesting because Brian and I had a very long discussion about like the new and old definitions of Omega levels. It makes sense because you don't want to have like Omega level be applicable to just like, okay, well, what if these two people fight, who wins kind of thing.
Sure.
They've moved away from that. It's more kind of defining about the power, like what your powers can be used for, and do you have any limitations on those, etc.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but like, I don't know. Like for me, it's like Omega level, it still kind of means what you think it means.
Yeah.
But they've changed the definition a touch.
In this 10 minutes, we also get a flash of like the Phoenix Force. So like it is just a little bit of fire in the eyes and Jean's eyes, and that's it. How did Claremont, because Claremont's the one who like brought the Phoenix Force into comics, right? Mm-hmm. What were the teases that he did? Because he's a big teaser. He likes to tease things early and then have them come to fruition much, much later.
I think Phoenix is really interesting because the original plan for the Phoenix Saga and what actually happened weren't the same thing.
Okay.
it like shifted and changed. So when you get the Phoenix Saga is split into two. It's the Phoenix Saga and then the Dark Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think you guys know what this is. So
if you've watched the animated series or the next movie.
Yeah.
Actually, the next movie is just Dark Phoenix. Nobody really plays with the Phoenix Saga except for the animated series.
Right,
did.
Yeah. And I think that that happens really early. Like, I mean, within the first couple issues, the Phoenix Saga starts to happen in Claremont's run, because it's like, I think it's like 108 or something. And he starts, like we talked about, like 100. So there isn't as much of foreshadowing, because it seems like he came to the X-Men comics knowing that that was the story he was going to tell.
Awesome.
What is there, though, because it's based on the original run where, like, it was supposed to be Jean and it wasn't a whole different person, like, you know, what it ends up being in the Dark Phoenix.
We'll get into that whole thing next movie.
We got a whole another movie for that, so I'm not touching that. We got
2 movies we could be doing that with.
That's true.
I don't know what we're going to do, but we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. But, like, what we can talk about is basically the hints are very similar. It's like, it's about Jean Grey and her behavior. In the movie, it's a little bit more, it feels like something is acting upon
it's
her
like
a little bit.
Power surges.
Yeah. In the comics, it's similar, where she starts being able to do things she wasn't done before, but also her personality shifts. She kind of becomes more like forceful, and her approach to things. If I'm being completely honest, it's her shift from her in the Stan Lee comics to what I would say is Jean Grey's personality now, in a way.
Well, because in the Silver Age, Jean Grey is just the lady.
Right.
Like,
and,
in the early, like, first couple of issues, she has trouble lifting a person.
Yeah.
And they give that power creep pretty quickly. She's starting to be able to lift more and more as time goes on, as you would any muscle. But the fact that, like, her one power is to lift things and she can't even lift a person is crazy. She's just eye candy at that point, because she doesn't have her telepathic powers either.
Right. She becomes kind of more of like a forceful personality, a little bit more fiery. Like,
she's less timid, more confident.
Exactly.
Which is current Jean Grey.
Right. And
she is not timid.
Right. No,
you would
not
never.
At all.
You would never.
And you know, it's a little bit of both, right? Because, like, you have to remind yourself that in those early comics, Jean Grey is really young and she's growing up also. Yeah. So, like, some of that is hidden with, like, her growing up and her and Scott being in a real relationship now. Like, I think Claremont did a good job of being like, is she just changing because she's growing? And then it's like, wait, no, something else is going on. And then you spiral into the Phoenix Saga and then the Dark Phoenix Saga, when those powers become kind of out of her control, which is kind of what we're already getting in the movie here. We don't really get her getting powers and it being a good thing.
I think, it's the misstep the next movie will do is that you don't do the Phoenix Saga. You don't do the, like, she sacrifices herself at the end of this movie. Spoiler alert if you've seen this movie. But she does the power up, the Phoenix power up sacrifice, and that's it.
Right.
I need her to have powers and then use those powers to sacrifice herself.
Right. And to make the sacrifice worth it too, of like, she's getting all these new powers and it's so exciting and she's becoming powerful and she's becoming a heavy hitter on the team, and then before she can even really enjoy that life, she has to sacrifice herself. And she's totally, like, for her it's like, these powers are here so I can save my friends, and then to do it's so much more impactful than to just go straight from power sacrifice, like, immediately. Like, she doesn't get to sit in the middle and you know what I mean, a little bit. I don't know, like,
the power just completely corrupts without any of the benefits,
right?
You know, like, any story that has a rise and fall, like Scarface, or, you know, it's like somebody who works hard or gets in the right circumstances, has all this power. There's always a minute there where the power is it's all peachy keen,
right?
Until it falls,
right.
And we don't get that,
right? And I think it's also doing a huge disservice to the concept of the Phoenix Force. Yeah. Because the way that it is in the movies is kind of in the way that you see it only as this evil force, which in the comics it isn't.
It's just a cosmic force.
It's a cosmic entity.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, it doesn't
It
have
is neither
the same morals.
Yes, it's neither good nor evil.
And I think that the comics did a really good job of adjusting that because of there are other phoenixes, other telepaths that, I'm not going to get into that.
Oh, we will get into it.
Not right
just
now.
Not right now.
But like,
because we're running out of time right now.
We're always running out of time, James.
Sorry to bring up the Phoenix and then tease it ourselves, and we will come back to it later.
But yes. So I'm really excited to talk about that because I think I would love to just talk about all the people who have to interact with the Phoenix. We can just spend one whole movie talking about that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. We'll wrap it up here. I've been producer James.
I'm Stasha.
And we'll see you for the next 10.